Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Okay, Stillman and Company here on the 440 Sports Network. Here presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, coming to you from the Great White North one more time. Out here in Canada, my original plan, our plan to be live at 2 o'clock and everything else like normal. I was like, we're going to be traveling all day back from Canada. And we did a bunch of bonus shows when they fired Brian Callahan. So I say, you know what, let's push this one. And then the Titans went out there and made what I think is an incredibly stupid trade. So, yeah, I know you all know about it, but the breaking news today came from all the insiders, and then 5 seconds later, the Titans put it out there. The Titans are dealing Roger McCreery to the LA Rams in exchange for a 2026 conditional 5th-round pick in exchange for a 2026 conditional 6th-round pick. So let me break that down into English for you. This was what Adam Schefter said. So the 5th rounder that the Titans gave last year to get Ernest Jones to the Rams, whom the Rams are going to release anyways, but that pick, and then you could have just claimed him off of waivers, that pick that you gave the Rams is now going back to you in the 5th, and your lowest 6th-round pick, which could be pretty low, will go to the Rams. And I did do the number crunching, and that is the equivalent of a mid-5th-round pick. So the Titans have dealt Roger McCreery to the Rams for essentially a mid-5th-round pick, but I do want to point out the fact that for the second time, they have dealt one of their starting corners to a team for a day 3 pick swap in which they did not receive an extra pick in the deal. Now, I'll explain why that's important here in just a second, but I want to just put out there the number one kind of thesis of what I'm trying to explain and why I felt the need that we have to have a breaking news and reaction to this, and that is I am convinced that whatever you want to call this collaboration, this dual general manager, football decision-making position, whatever the fuck you want to call it, between Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi, I have reached the stage where I've decided they don't know what they're doing. And that's kind of the scary part. Because, again, we know the Titans are bad. And we know that a lot of people have played a role in the Titans being bad. John Robinson played a role in the Titans being bad. Rand Carthon played a role in the Titans being bad. Brian Callahan played a role in the Titans being bad. Bill Callahan played a role in the Titans being bad. These guys have played a role in the Titans being bad to an extent. You know, Brinker was here the whole time. Even the great Mike Vrabel played a role in the Titans being bad. Now, you can revise history like everybody else. I'm not going to do that. And so Vrabel certainly was not all culpable, but there were some mistakes Vrabel made along the way. Aaron Brewer. So, that we all know. But that's spilt milk. That's not going to change. They're not going to hire Robinson back. They're not going to hire Rand Carthon back. They're not going to hire Brian Callahan back. But the hope is that if we want to stop watching terrible football on Sundays, like we had to endure yesterday, although some of us have made the choice to just stop watching the Titans, but if we want to stop watching that terrible football, like we watched, the guys that are running the team have to have a clue going forward. And the truth is, these guys do not have a clue. And this is another example of it. So forget about everything that happened in the past. J.C. Latham over Brock Bowers, the L'Jarius Sneed trade, Will Levis, Brian Callahan. Forget about all of that. And let's just start off with, since Mike Borgonzi has been the general manager of the Titans. Since Mike Borgonzi has shown up, and I have no idea what Mike Borgonzi does, and I have no idea what level of authority Mike Borgonzi has, and I have no idea what level of pull Borgonzi's going to have in the coaching search. But since Mike Borgonzi has come to the Titans, what have they done? They signed Dan Moore to play left tackle in free agency. Now, I actually think that was a good signing because even though Cam gets sacked a lot, I think some of that is probably more on Cam than it is on the individual lineman. I think the coaching is terrible. And I think J.C. Latham should have been playing right tackle the whole time. And I think that Dan Moore is solid at left tackle. There are a couple of times where you'll say, oh, Dan Moore, but it's not like it was with Andre Dillard or Dennis Daly or PT when he was playing right tackle. So Dan Moore, fine. Kevin Zeitler. Cody Barton. Jarvis Brownlee. Jalen Armour Davis, number 18. He'll play over Brownlee. He's terrible. So each of those moves was kind of like, really? Even Joey Sly for Nick Folk. And I know I crapped on Nick Folk when they traded for him, but the one thing that Mini Leg did was he got up there and he kicked the ball through the uprights when he was the kicker of the Titans. And the Titans said, no. Joey Sly. And Joey Sly misses about one kick a game. So I would say that was probably a bad move. So a lot of the moves they've made so far, I'm not sure have been very good. So that is concerning. What bothers me, though, is I go back to Borgonzi taking the job. And the only place he'd ever been is Kansas City. And the only thing that he could talk about is Kansas City. And so he's going to get up there and talk about Kansas City, Kansas City, Kansas City. And I'm aware of this, and everybody's worked with somebody that comes from somewhere, and they're like, well, when I was at Cal, what we did, and at Cal, and when I was working at Cal, and one thing I learned from my time at Cal, and eventually it gets to a point where you're like, enough, you're not there anymore. But we want to be the Chiefs. So when he came in and talked Chiefs, I said, okay. And again, this is not just pointed at Borgonzi because Brinker's a part of this too. And Brinker's probably the bigger part, but we'll focus on just Borgonzi here for a second. Borgonzi talked Chiefs. And then Mike Borgonzi was a part of a duo that decided to do at quarterback with the single biggest piece of currency that they had, the number one overall pick, the opposite of what the Kansas City Chiefs did. So when Andy Reid got to Kansas City, they had the number one pick. They were the worst team in the league, and he drafted Eric Fisher, a left tackle, because he knew Geno Smith was not going to succeed or that E.J. Manuel was not going to succeed. So he went out and he acquired a veteran quarterback, Alex Smith. At the time had been benched. Nobody thought Alex Smith was the greatest quarterback ever, but he was solid, had almost identical statistics to Sam Darnold. And Daniel Jones was out there, and Geno Smith ended up being traded, so you could have gotten in the mix on that. I mean, there were veteran quarterbacks to be had. But Mike Borgonzi and Chad Brinker do the exact opposite of everything that the Chiefs do. And so you may love Cam Ward, and you may be hopeful that, hey, it's everybody else holding Cam back. I mean, that seems to be the, I don't want to say party line around here, but that seems to be the true blue Kool-Aid drinking take, is that Cam Ward was the right pick. Cam Ward's going to be really good, and everybody else is holding him back, including now the interim coach who's holding him back, just like the previous coach was holding him back, just like all the players are holding him back, just like everything else, which, again, I think is a little ridiculous. I just don't think Cam Ward's that good. But that's a different discussion. So I'm trying to figure out what the plan here is. Like, how do you plan to become a better football team? And trading away starting corners a week before the deadline is next week. Trading away starting corners and not even receiving standalone picks in return is not the recipe to get this team out of the gutter. If that's the best the Rams were offering, hey, we'll offer you a fifth in exchange for a sixth. I would say back, I'm going to need a sixth in next year's draft too. I need one extra standalone pick. And it's not even about the round that matters as much, the fifth, the sixth, etc., because those are all lottery tickets and everybody knows it. But the one thing that I look at is I'm like, the Titans are going to have to replenish their roster, and they're going to have to do it via free agency as much as the draft this upcoming year because they don't have any picks. So they have one pick in the first, they have one pick in the second, and they have one pick in the third. So that's just the standard amount of picks. They need more first-round picks and more second-round picks. They need top 60. I'll live with top 100, but the real key is top 60. They need more top 60 draft choices, and they're not doing anything in order to try to get them. And so if I'm the Titans, I'm looking at how I have to build my team going into next year, knowing that I can't be this terrible forever, right? Like, I can't bring back the same group of players and expect them all just to get better next season because I made Matt Nagy the coach, which may be what they're banking on. But if I asked you today, hey, are you banking on Matt Nagy or Arthur Smith or Mike McCarthy making every single player like markedly better? I already know the answer to that, and so do you. Now, your answer may change because you want it to change, but your answer 6 weeks ago would not have been, yeah, Mike McCarthy will come in here and he'll turbocharge a depleted roster. There are only a couple of guys who I think really have the potential to actually become starting NFL players that are already on the team. Skoronski's already a starting NFL player. Dan Moore, already a starting NFL player. Cam has the potential to be a starting NFL player, although I'm not a huge Cam guy. I think Chimere Dike may have a shot to be a starting NFL player because he can run. I don't think Io Manner's a starting NFL player. I don't think Gunnar Helm is a starting NFL player. And before you go crazy about Gunnar Helm, just go watch Tucker Kraft last night. That's a starting player in the NFL. I don't know anything about Kevin Winston because he doesn't play. So I can't say he's got the potential to be a starting player because I'm not sure. Oladejo, I'm not going to give him that. Simmons is a starting player. Maybe Cedric Gray. So outside of that, you got to go fix pretty much everything. How do you do that with one first-round pick, one second-round pick, and one third-round pick? But Jared, we will trade the pick. Okay. Again, let's dive in. If you were to trade the pick, if you were to say, you know what, we're going to end up with a top pick. So Miss Amy, what we're going to do in our giant plan is we're going to deal that number one pick. And we're going to get a big haul and who's the top quarterback in this year's class? Is Fernando Mendoza, who might be QB1 on the board, is Fernando Mendoza going to fetch a king's ransom? Secondly, I don't expect the Titans to win another game this year, so maybe it won't be an issue. But if the draft were to be held today, you don't have the first pick. You have the third pick. And you're not going to get a king's ransom for the third pick. And this isn't the draft. I think the people are going to be circling saying, hey, this is the draft where you want the big picks. It's going to be next year's draft. So, again, I can't just bank on, well, we're going to trade our pick because I don't know where that's going to be. You need picks. And this is what takes me back to the standalone picks that they're not getting for Brownlee and McCreery. I think it's fair to say the Brownlee trade was already a bad trade. If anything, we'll look back on the Brownlee trade and say the biggest thing he did was he ended the ball game last night for the Jets so that they would win, so that maybe the Jets don't go 0-17, and maybe you do get the first pick. And the difference between the third pick and the first pick is like 2 first-rounders. So I would say Jarvis Brownlee was worth that. So maybe in the end, by sheer luck, Jarvis Brownlee going to the Jets ends up helping the Titans. But that's a bad trade. I mean, Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets, I think he covers them for SNY. Make sure that. He covers them for The Athletic. Zach Rosenblatt tweeted out yesterday, quote, "It should be said that one, Darren Mogi, who's their general manager of the Jets, Darren Mogi hit an absolute home run with the Jarvis Brownlee trade. 2, what on earth were the Titans thinking trading him away for nothing?" So that's already a bad trade. And you didn't get a standalone pick for that. Well, if I'm the Titans and I don't get a standalone pick for Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I'm not trading Jarvis Brownlee Jr. And again, you can tell me bad discipline and bad professionalism. I guess it's not bad enough for Aaron Glenn. Well, they're playing him in the slot, Jared, and the Titans were playing him outside. Okay, well, did you just decide to trade Roger McCreery this morning, or was that on the table before in which you would have said, hey, if it doesn't go well, we'll trade McCreery and Chig and these expiring contracts and try to get picks back in return? And because if that's the case, then you would have just said, okay, well, and then when we do that, we'll shift Brownlee back inside. And it's not I'm crying about Brownlee or crying about McCreery as much as it is your process for how you're trading these players away does not add up. It doesn't make any sense. And if your process isn't adding up and it's not making any sense, then your process to land a head coach is not going to make any sense. It's not going to add up. Your process on who to select with the first pick is not going to add up. The second pick, the third pick. I mean, I don't know what they're doing, and I am convinced they don't know what they're doing. Because every single time it has been a, hey, trust us. Just trust us. And then somebody gets fired. They drafted a quarterback with the number 1 overall pick, turning down a huge trade opportunity with a head coach who was on the hot seat. Did they expect Brian Callahan to start the year off 1-6? No. But there's a difference between expect and also understanding, hey, worst case scenario. And worst case scenario was, hey, he's on the hot seat. If this doesn't work out, we're going to fire the coach. And then if we fire the coach, we're going to have a lame duck season, and we're going to be starting all over the next year with Cam having already learned bad habits and the teammates around Cam who are going to need to develop, like a J.C. Latham or like a Chimray DK or whatever. They're also going to learn bad habits. So if we're not sure about the coach, let's wait off on the quarterback and let's go get a veteran quarterback so that the coach can worry about coaching and not just the quarterback. And instead the Titans like, no, it'll work. It'll work. Not even halfway through, they fired the coach. That thinking doesn't compute. It reminds me a lot of Callahan. When Callahan came in here, and he was great in the press conference. And I sat down with Callahan, and I told Callahan the right tackle story. And Callahan laughed and was like, hey, in this league, you need 2 good tackles. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Oh, praise Jesus. Brian Callahan, he understands they're going to need a right tackle. And then when they got to the combine, he's like, I think Nicholas Petit-Frere and Jalen Duncan can do it. And I thought, that doesn't really add up. It doesn't really add up at all. But Jared, just trust us. And then midway through the year, it's like, yeah, well, we can't get a right tackle. Why not? Because you didn't plan for it to begin with. And again, they didn't plan to fire the head coach, but I don't plan to get in a car accident. I have car insurance. I don't plan for my house to catch on fire. I don't plan for those things to happen. But I have homeowner's insurance. Because as I learned when my son got a partially amputated finger a couple weeks ago, shit happens. And these guys, I don't see what they're doing. And here's again why standalone picks do matter. Because day 3 picks represent one of 3 things. Day 3 picks represent, in the offseason, a lottery ticket player. Could end up being David Long Jr. He's a very, very good day 3 player. I'm not going to sit there and tell you about Tom Brady because that's ridiculous and that almost never happens. But it could be David Long Jr. It could be Robert Smith. It could be Carlos Hall. It could be Peter Sermon. Like, it could be these players the Titans have had over the years that have been pretty good. So it could be John Runyon, who was an all-pro tackle. So the day 3 picks are lottery tickets. Most of those guys end up stinking, and that's okay. But every now and then, you hit on David Long. That's the first thing they can be. The second thing they can be is they can be used to trade up for the next year. So what happens is day of the draft, it's the 5th round. Somebody loves a player they didn't think was going to be there. They call you up and they say, we got to have Jimmy in the 5th this year. Well, I've got an extra 5th. I'm on the clock. I don't want Jimmy. They want Jimmy. I don't. I'll take your 4th next year. Because the way that teams view picks is that a 1st rounder next year is like a 2nd rounder. A 3rd rounder next year is like a 4th rounder. You subtract around. So if you want a 5th rounder today, you got to give me your 4th next year. And that's how guys like Howie Roseman turn 6ths into 3rds and 2nds, which again is what you got to do. And the third thing that the Titans would be able to do with day 3 picks is that is the currency that you can use to trade for players that are on contracts that teams don't necessarily want to pay anymore. And that's important because the one thing you don't have to do, it's almost like free agency, but you don't have to pay the signing bonus. So let's take Deebo Samuel as an example. The Titans are going to need a starting receiver. Last year, Deebo Samuel, I don't even know what he was traded for. I think it was a 5th. Maybe it was a 6th. Deebo Samuel, because San Francisco didn't want Deebo Samuel anymore. San Francisco basically told everybody, hey, who wants Deebo Samuel? And Deebo Samuel was traded for a 2025 5th. That is a starting receiver. Let me ask you, who would be the best receiver on the Titans if you traded for Deebo Samuel? Deebo. So that is a starting receiver that you can acquire with a day 3 pick. And there's always guys out there that are like that. That every year teams are like, we're probably going to cut this guy, but we would like to get something in return. And so instead of cutting this guy, let's go ahead and, we'll take a 5th next year. And that's where the standalone pick matters, because when you're swapping a 6th for a 5th, well, you could have traded that 6th pretty much the same way you could have traded that 5th. So again, when it comes to the trade of Roger McCreery, I would have needed a standalone pick in order to move off of him for the rest of the season, even if I wasn't planning to re-sign him at the end of this season. Because again, if everybody calls you and you panic and you take the lowest possible offer and you don't wait until the deadline to make those kind of deals, then you are selling low. You are panic selling. That is a fire sale. And that is what morons do. So, there are going to be corner injuries this upcoming week and teams that may need a corner. The old man used to tell me, you can never have enough corners. Is Roger McCreery a good corner? Not particularly. But he's not a bad corner. He's a starting NFL corner. Remember when the Titans went to the AFC Championship game and Malcolm Butler was on IR and they were starting some guy named Tremaine Brock Sr. at corner? It's because you can never have enough corners. And so, again, for a starting corner, if you called me and said, hey, I'm interested in a starting corner, I'm looking at McCreery, what would it take? And you say, I would say a 4th next year, knowing that I may have to move off of it a little bit. And they say, well, how about a 5th? And again, the Titans are going to try to chart you on this. And they're going to say, well, the low 6th for the high 5th has the value of a 5th, which is technically true. But again, I need a standalone pick. So if you want to do that, you got to give me a standalone pick in next year's draft. You got to give me a 6th. You got to give me a 5th in next year's draft. I need more for Roger McCreery. I need more for Jarvis Brownlee. And what this shows me is it shows me that they don't know how the trade market works. They don't have any clue. They have no idea how the trade market works. Not really sure they have much of an idea about how quarterback development works. I know that Chad Brinker says they've won all those Super Bowls up there, but the truth is Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers won them all their Super Bowls that they brag about. And right now, Bill Belichick has a bunch of he's got 8 Super Bowls, the way Chad Brinker counts them. Want him to be head coach? Of course not. So again, today, the deal, the McCreery trade, I don't have some sort of humongous anti-Roger McCreery trade, move on from him. whatever it may. I have no problem with getting rid of McCreery or getting rid of Chig or getting rid of Draymond Jones, or I don't have any problem with that. But the return the Titans are getting is terrible. And this is a lot like DeAndre Hopkins last year, where it was like, well, DeAndre pouted on the sidelines and he wanted to go somewhere where he could win, and Kansas City offered a bag of footballs. So we said, okay. No, it's okay. Kansas City, you don't have any receivers, so it's going to cost a little bit more. Don't want them? Okay. You try to go defend your Super Bowl title with some bozo out there instead of DeAndre Hopkins. And I bet Kansas City would have upped the price a little bit. When Seattle called and offered a 4th rounder for Ernest Jones, I liked Ernest Jones. I still like Ernest Jones, but that's a 4th round pick. Go ahead and do it. So I am stunned by this return. When I saw McCreery was traded, I was thinking like, okay, let's see. Like, what'd they get? Like a 5th? And it's like, well, they got a 5th, but they had to give up a 6th. And so by the chart, that's a mid-5th, but they didn't add any extra players. And they're going to have to add so many players. And they haven't said this, and I have asked them about this, and they have, you know, when you talk to somebody and they go out of their way to not really answer your question. So I have talked to them about this, and they have kind of gone out of their way to not really answer the question. But I'm pretty sure Amy is keeping the payroll down while they sell PSLs and try to get that new stadium built. And as the cost overruns go up, when you hear people talk about building expenses and tariffs and things like that, that is money that the Titans have agreed with the city they're going to pay. So if tariffs and building materials and inflation goes up, then that means the Titans have to pay more on the stadium. And again, that's Amy's money. And I could see Amy saying like, oh, we can't get a corner this year because we need $18 million more for new toilet bowls at the stadium, so that all the visiting fans that come in here while we get our asses kicked every week can take a shit while the other team takes a shit on us. But I am convinced of that. So you're going to be very limited in what you can do from a resource standpoint. You're not willing to trade the only guy on your roster that would get you a decent return. That's Simmons. They've already come out and said, we're not going to trade Simmons, even though I don't see Simmons being any good by the time the Titans, if they were to have a window, would be good again. Or it would be like for 1 year, like Jarrell Casey or Delaney Walker. So that doesn't necessarily sit well with me, that they're not interested in trading Simmons. But you have to fill the roster for next year. And today you gave up a player in order to get a better pick than you already had, but you didn't add any future players to the team. And that's what they need. That's what forced them out of the 35th pick and into Femi Oladipo, was they needed an extra body because they made the L'Jarius Sneed trade. So again, today is not the revelation to me. I called my dad and I talked about the game yesterday, and my dad was like, I'm getting to the point. And my dad's a day one season ticket holder. He loves the Titans. He told me, he's getting to the point where he's like, I can't watch this team anymore on Sundays. There's other football on. There's better things I can be doing with my life than watch this team. And I feel that sentiment. But he said today, and he is not like me. You know, Robbie and Joe used to talk about this because they knew my dad a little bit. And they were like, oh, yeah, he's like the opposite of Jared in how he reacts. And he is not one to fire people on a consistent basis. And he told me today, he's like, they got to get rid of all these guys. He's like, they got to get rid of Brinker. They got to get rid of the other one. He's like, they got to get rid of them. And I have no idea who has what authority. I have no idea what is Brinker's decision and what is Borgonzi's decision. And TD asked them when it came to hiring the coach, who's in charge. And they said, well, we're going to decide on the coach together. So they're not going to tell you, and they never do. So I'll just say this. You know what? Fuck them. They don't know what they're doing. Collectively as a group, they don't know. And they're not going to learn. And today was another example, like the Brownlee trade, like some of the free agent decisions and other things they've done. Today was another example of the Tennessee Titans not having a clue what they're doing. And that's the new general manager and the president of football operations, who apparently is his boss, who, again, we don't know who does what, but who are going to hire the next coach and use this draft pick that is apparently going to be pretty high, though we don't know if it'll be number 1 or not. These are the guys that have constructed a team with a head coach that really deserve to be 0-17. They are an Imani DeMarcado fumble away, in my opinion. I think they're going to go 1-16. They are a DeMarcado fumble away, in my opinion, from being an 0-17 team. And I really mean that. So I am baffled by this return from McCreery. Bad return, good trade for the Rams. But of course, that's what the Rams do. And this is what happens when you have general managers and presidents and all these people are, saying, we want this, we want that, and nobody really knows what they're doing. All right, let's talk Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They know what they're doing. Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. They've been in business since 1990. They're family-owned and operated with 100% satisfaction of happy you'll be or the service is free. If a customer is not pleased with the work performed, Hiller will make it right. You can learn more at happyhiller.com. Professional, experienced, trustworthy technicians come into your home and leave it clean and better than they found it. Care is their core value, where they believe that when they care about others, everyone wins. They'll take care of the customer on every job, every time. And they're proud supporters of the Nashville Predators, the Vanderbilt Commodores, and the Tennessee Volunteers. I use Hiller at my home. They are the best. We talk about how these people don't know what they're doing. Hiller knows what they're doing. You call them out. You pay them after they do, they give you, they kind of do the estimate. They give you the true transparency pricing. They do the job. You pay. You never have to call them back out there because they get the job done. That's why I love them at my home. Use Hiller. All right, we're back in studio tomorrow at 2 o'clock with your typical show. There is a guest I'm working on that I'm pretty excited about. We may have tomorrow. We'll see. That's going to do it for us here at Abbreviated Show. We weren't going to have a show, and then the Titans traded Roger McCreery, so now I'll probably take Friday off. Who knows? Stillman and Company, like and subscribe. And tell all your friends, like and subscribe. And we're going to keep doing this, where we'll go with breaking news stuff as soon as the Titans do stuff on a consistent basis. Stillman and Company, right here, 440 Sports. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends, and we'll see everybody tomorrow from the studio at 2 o'clock.